from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, let's head out to the hotline and bring on Shelby Manning from Predominantly Orange at Shelby Manning PO on Twitter, and of course Predom Orange on Twitter for their site. Shelby, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Ryan Edwards, Benjamin Allbright, how are you?
I am great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. It's always a beautiful night here in the Mile High City, and we're thrilled to talk to you. I really enjoyed your article that you guys released, Women Belong in Sports, the Ladies of Broncos Country. I know that you worked on this with Nick Manning there at Predominantly Orange. Can you tell me about the reason why you guys wanted to put this piece out when you did?
Okay. Thank you for asking, and thank you for complimenting us on that. It was a really fun project. So I think the Women Belong in Sports movement has really been gaining some momentum on social media, and I know that they just had the Women Belong in Sports Day, and Nick was actually the one who inspired the whole project. He approached me, and he was like, hey, we have a lot of great ladies in Broncos country. Would you like to set up, a time to interview them, talk about their experiences? And I was like, of course. And, we got to talk to some really awesome ladies from all sorts of places. And they had a lot of really insightful things to tell us. And it was so much fun to put together.
Yeah, I had fun reading it. And it really was, for me personally, it's one of those things where I guess we can't conceptualize what it's like to be a female fan. And I think that gets lost on it because, it seems to me, and just in partial observation, that you guys get condescended to a lot. There's no way you could know, blah, blah, blah. You didn't, all that kind of stuff. And it's always funny to me when, a guy who never played sits there and says, well, how could you know? You never played. I feel like there's hypocrisy to that. But I think that people are becoming more and more aware that, women do belong in sports and they do belong in football, and they can have nuanced and great opinions and offer insight that we might miss, and those kinds of things. And so I was glad to see that this piece kind of touched on, a little bit of that and kind of got differing attitudes about the space. And honestly, I was happy that it seemed like most people said that it was a welcoming space.
Yes, for sure. I know, of course, and of course, speaking from a female perspective, there's always those trolls that, come after you for your gender. You say something they disagree with because, of course, we see on Broncos Twitter that a lot of people don't agree on stuff. And, you always have those people that immediately come after you because you're a woman. And unfortunately, a lot of the women that we talk to have experienced that. I've seen it on my timeline. And unfortunately, that's just I don't know if I ever see it changing, but for the most part, Broncos Twitter, Broncos social media has been very accepting. I've gotten to interact with so many great people, and with the people that, just lift you up, it's pretty easy to kind of push out the trolls.
No doubt about it. One of my favorite things in this article, and then I want to talk about some of the current Broncos stuff, but one of my favorite things about this article is when you asked the ladies, Tori, Lindsay, Kara, Sarah, I know Bree was in here, Bridget. You guys, I think 7, right? 7 Broncos fans you guys interviewed. You asked them, how did you first connect with the Broncos? And this was really cool. It was really touching. That part right there made me wonder for you, how did you first connect to the Broncos?
I became a Broncos fan via my mom. Just from the time that I was little, we were watching games, and, she loved the Broncos. And that's how I got into it, too. Between my mom and my dad, my mom was actually the football fanatic, not my dad.
What is your all-time favorite Broncos moment?
Okay, so, I am 25 years old, so I was really young during, Super Bowl 31, 32. So I was not old enough to remember that. Of course, those are my mom's favorite memories. But, there's a lot of great, the whole Peyton Manning era was just awesome. Champ Bailey's pick six against the Patriots so many years ago, but I would say Super Bowl 50 has to be the best.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Broncos coming up this year. It's a pretty hot topic. This is a safe space on radio. So without people like jumping into your mentions about the quarterback position, what did you think about Drew Lock's performance this year? I want to get a little bit of a baseline on where you think Lock is developmentally, and then let's push that forward to what you sort of hope the Broncos will do in 2021.
Drew Lock, essentially this was his rookie season, as a lot of people said, his first full season as a starting quarterback. And, of course, it was such a weird year with COVID. We had the situation where Kendall Hinton had to play quarterback. But nonetheless, I don't think Drew Lock has shown enough that he is the undisputed starter. And, of course, I think a lot of people would agree with that. A lot of people want to see us roll with Drew Lock. And, I have not given up on Drew Lock. I think he still has the capacity to be very good, but I would like to see the Broncos bring in somebody to compete with him. We have so many people that want Deshaun Watson, and obviously that's, best case scenario for the Broncos, but whether that actually is a scenario for the Broncos is another question. I've always been a really big fan of Matt Stafford. For years, I wanted to see him brought to Denver, but of course, Denver missed out on that by a little bit. But there's been some momentum around, maybe Denver should bring in like Andy Dalton or Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick could be an interesting fit.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, the franchise tag window is open. What will the Broncos do with Justin Simmons? We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Today's the first day that NFL players can be franchise tagged. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Justin Simmons' name is at the top of most lists with the expectation that the Broncos will tag him by March 9th if they can't come to an agreement. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of an interesting spot here for really both sides because – as we've talked about multiple times on the show, I 100% understand, and I think most Broncos fans understand the business side of this thing, where the Broncos are coming from on this. They may be not wanting to reset the market at the safety position. They're already paying Kareem Jackson. You would have the highest paid safety tandem in the league. Maybe they don't want to do that. We have a new GM. We don't really know necessarily what he wants to do. On the other side of this thing, this guy has done everything for your organization. He's done everything for the community, and you have been a team that has been needing these kinds of players that do everything the right way and play at an elite level to draft, develop, and become faces of your franchise. So there's some battling instincts for me on this because I on one hand, I'm like, yeah, of course, I understand why the Broncos don't want to reset the market for a safety position, especially as they're still trying to decide what they're going to do with the quarterback. But on the other hand, my goodness, what precedent are you setting if you don't get this guy done, get this contract done?
Well, this is a referendum, and I've said this before, it's a referendum on George Payton right off the bat as a general manager because he came out with that speech, Fire and Brimstone, talking about how he wanted to draft and develop. And, the Broncos drafted Justin Simmons on day 2. They developed him. He's become an all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber safety. He is an absolute saint off the field. And, a great player, all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber player on the field. You literally can't do any better than that. And so, I think that it really does become a referendum on his general managership. And if you want to start off on the right foot, I think that's the contract that you got to get done. And if you make him happy, Justin's a leader in the locker room. He might not be the most vocal guy, but he's a leader in that locker room, and people look to him. And so I think that getting him done says, hey, look, we're going to take care of our own. You guys coming up, we're going to take care of you. Because so far, that hasn't been the example that was set. When John Elway was running things, they let Connor McGovern, Matt Paradis, they let these guys, Malik Jackson, let these guys go.
So let me ask you something, because right now the expectation, the overwhelming expectation from everybody, you have James Palmer from NFL Network out there. Overwhelmingly, everybody is saying that Justin Simmons is going to get the second franchise tag. What changes here? What takes this from the inevitability that Justin Simmons gets the second franchise tag, which, by the way, he does not want? What takes this from what we are anticipating to happen to turn it on its head and all of a sudden this thing changes quickly? Because we're in the window right now. They can get something done. If the Broncos want to extend Justin Simmons long term, they don't have to go back and forth with this. And that's another thing. Mike Kliss pointed this out. I thought this was appropriate. He took the top 5 contracts. They're only different by less than $1 million.
Right.
Like $800,000 separates the number 1 through like the number 5.
Right.
We're not talking like a massive sweeping change here. And even if they reset it and just say, okay, you're a $15 million per year safety, because right now I think 14.7 is the top. I mean, at
14.5 gets it done. I'll just tell you.
Okay, so there you go.
14.5 APY by 4 gets it done.
So what are we doing here?
Well, and they were, I can also tell you that the Broncos were close last year. They were about $600,000 a year off. Justin has a line in the sand, and he should. He wants to be respected. He wants top 5 safety money just because he wants to be respected. And that's that. He doesn't need to be the highest paid safety on the market. He feels like the top 5 would be taking a little bit of a discount. You don't have to reset the market. I think that, the Broncos could get this done tomorrow. Now, what do I think they're going to do? I think they're going to wait till about a week to 5 days before that franchise tag is due and put an offer in front of him and say, look, here's what we're going to offer. And if this isn't going to work, then we'll have to franchise tag you to continue to try to work this stuff out. And that's the direction it'll go. I think that's a smart negotiating tactic from the Broncos side. It's not, it's just probably not going to be the best offer. It might not be the number Justin wants to see, but I think they're going to put an equitable offer out there as a starting point and go from there. Listen to your player. He's telling you what he wants. He's being very specific in telling you what he wants. And note the benefits of doing that in this particular case, because the trickle down from the culture shift that we take care of our own in this locker room will be huge, because you might be moving on from Von Miller, and that's the last guy you paid, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Garrett, but that's the last guy on that defensive side that you paid.
But again, we're talking face of the franchise kind of move.
Right.
And most teams, it's the quarterback. But for the Broncos, for a long time now, it has been the defense.
Yeah,
and it's been Von Miller.
Outside of Peyton Manning, it's been Von Miller.
Yeah.
And there's a new, there's a new guy in town. It's Justin Simmons. That's the new face of the franchise.
Now, you don't mess this up.
Don't mess this up.
How will he take it if this goes back and forth all the way to March 9th and they tag him?
I think the longer it drags on, I mean, if they put an offer in front of him, he's going to be happy. He hasn't heard anything from him yet. The Broncos have not put an offer in front of him. So if they put something in front of him, I think that will lessen the stress and the anxiety, and we'll say, hey, look, we're looking to make a commitment. Here's what we're starting with.
It does feel like they're sweating him a little bit, doesn't it? I understand.
I think George Payton also needs to say that he's not a pushover. He can't just throw money at.
No, I get that, and I understand negotiation tactics here.
Right.
And we've been now over a decade with John Elway and seen many of his negotiation tactics. But this just seems too obvious, and I think that's why we're all sort of prepared for the inevitable shoe to drop. And why are we waiting for that when really this organization, this franchise, they need this win? Garrett Bowles represented a win for John, right? You remember that? I mean, getting Garrett Bowles to play at the level that he did and then to eventually give him the contract that he did, that was a win for John.
Right, because he needed a first rounder to pad out.
He needed that
badly.
desperately. And so he finally got that. This strikes me as this is a third rounder that eventually elevated to this level. I mean, this is another feather in your cap. John, you talk about legacy. That is so important to him. Now, he didn't get the legacy right with his quarterback, but he can point to several other players that came through here, whether undrafted or drafted, or specifically now some hits on drafts, that he can say, look, that one, I helped bring that, I ushered that in where there are so many other misses. Coming up next, we're going to get to the 2020 rookie wide receivers. We're going to re-rank them and find out where Judy falls in there. Tune in next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
We were asked by John Cooper on Twitter, and you can follow him on Twitter at JohnCooper23. He was asking us to take a look at the 2020 wide receiver class now that they've all played the entire full season. He said not just a ranking of the rookie season, but what do you think? Who do you think is going to have the best career? So I thought this would be kind of fun, a little fun exercise to roll through. Now, there's no way we could start this as they were drafted, because Henry Ruggs did not have a better season than Justin Jefferson. Same thing with Jerry Judy or CeeDee Lamb. All guys drafted ahead of Justin Jefferson did not have a better season than Justin Jefferson. He is by far, and away the best rookie wide receiver from this last year's class. Now, will he remain that after this year? That is a fascinating conversation.
I think there's going to be a little drop-off next year. I think teams are going to pay attention to him as the number one guy.
I mean, he may not get to 1,400 receiving yards.
You got a year's worth of tape on him. They'll switch it up, and he'll be the one guy, and then Adam Thielen, will probably have a little bit better season over there because he'll get number 2 receiver attention. And we'll see if he's able to, to overcome that. He's supremely talented. Don't get me wrong; he would be the best receiver. If you're doing a redraft right now, he'd obviously be at the top of the list for big reasons. Henry Ruggs was injured. Only started 12 games, but that's even with the other 4 games, he wasn't coming anywhere close to what Jefferson and some of these other guys did.
Where would you put Henry Ruggs? Just out of curiosity, we'll get to Jerry Judy in a second, but where would you put Henry Ruggs?
I mean, he'd be in the top 5 or 6. Okay. I mean, if you're going back and looking at this, there's one name that was overlooked that gets vaulted up. There's one name in that, and then the other guys are pretty much the guys you thought they were going to be: Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Jerry Judy, and Ruggs. Those guys are all going to be there in the top 5 or 6. The name that I think that got overlooked was Gabriel Davis.
Where does Chase Claypool fall?
He would have to be up in that top tier list as well.
Right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, 11 touchdowns.
Right.
He had 9 receiving, 2
second,
rushing.
Yeah, he was a year older than all those other guys. All those other guys that we mentioned, I think all those guys are 21, and I think Claypool was 22. I think the guys that look like they were overdrafted at this point are guys like Jalen Reagor, Henry Ruggs, guys like that. And I think guys that look like they were underdrafted are guys like Claypool and Gabriel Davis.
Okay, so let's get to Jerry Judy. Where does he rank?
I think he's in that top 5 or 6. I think he's one of the ones in that group. I mean, he still came away with...
He finished 5th in receiving yards.
Yeah, he still came away with 856 receiving yards. Now, granted, it was a 46% catch percentage. And my goodness, the drops were brutally bad.
It was the drops mixed with the on-target percentage because Drew Lock's on-target percentage was pretty bad as well this year. So it was a bit of the combination. But again, look at the guys that had success. Look at the quarterbacks that they had, they were working with. Justin Jefferson had Kirk Cousins. CeeDee Lamb had a mixture between Dak Prescott and then Andy Dalton. We're talking about veteran quarterbacks that know what they're doing. T. Higgins, that guy had a good year. He had a productive year.
Joe Burrow for quite a while.
Yeah, Joe Burrow for a while there. Then it was a bit of a mix, but he actually continued to produce. T. Higgins was another guy I feel like that we undervalued a little bit. I know I did a little bit. It was funny. T. Higgins was a guy that I was super high on, and then I don't know, for some reason I talked myself out of T. Higgins heading into the draft as a viable option.
Well, it's interesting because, and I still am not as high on him. I think he outproduced what he would normally do. I don't think he's going to be that guy all the time. Buffalo Bills were eyeballing T. Higgins. And they went down to his pro day, and they came away saying, you know what, this guy's going to take a while. Let's go out there and trade for Stephon Diggs. We're going to bring him in. We'll have a guy hit the ground running. We'll be ready to go. And that's what they did. That was the impetus for the Stephon Diggs deal, was after looking at Higgins, the guy they wanted in the draft, they said, yeah, this is going to take a little while. We're going to go out there. But Higgins looked like he acclimated to the league pretty well. So I wonder if it's, you go back and you look at Buffalo now, if they'd make that same deal. I think they would. Diggs outperformed what everybody thought he was going to do there with Josh Allen. But it's just interesting to kind of see some of the hindsight stuff.
Michael Pittman, I thought, also had a pretty good year. I think, and he was hurt for a good portion of it, but he's going to have a chance to bounce back. I mean, still a lot of talent. Denzel Mims was a guy that we both liked. Didn't really get a chance to get a lot of run because he was hurt, and then they had inconsistent quarterback play. Devin Duvernay I like out of Baltimore. I think that there's still something left there. He was kind of a part-time role guy. And then there's KJ Hamler. The Broncos went with 2 wide receivers there. KJ Hamler had 381 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He had some clutch plays. He had some clutch plays for the Broncos.
He really did.
But he also had a clutch drop, which is what people are going to remember, especially in that Kansas City game. He makes that catch. The Broncos are in scoring range. They have a chance to take the lead, or I think maybe it was tie there against Kansas City late. But he drops that. They opt to punt, and they lose the game. But the point is we think both KJ Hamler and Jerry Judy have plenty more room to grow. And
right.
Whereas you're having conversations about T. Higgins and saying maybe he's reached what you think is his relative ceiling, I think that when you take a look at Jerry Judy and KJ Hamler, we're sort of barely scratching the surface.
I think that a guy like Judy, what his skill set is, I think you'll probably see the largest improvement out of him, to be honest. And I would say that if he was on any team, not just the Broncos, just because of the skill set that he has. You can't press him. He's great off the line. He's great in and out of his breaks. You talk to opposing DBs, guys like Xavier Howard, and they say he's the best receiver that they went against. Once he gets the hands thing down and the concentration thing down, he's going to be an all-pro kind of talent. So, I think that he's got the biggest leap forward potentially. And then I think Higgins is probably the guy that kind of falls back to the pack because he's kind of a one-trick pony.
So, yeah, and with Jerry Judy, you also have to keep in mind this last year. This isn't an excuse or anything because, again, the drops were there, and that's concentration. And then Drew Lock was struggling. But what we have covered a little bit on the show, but I think bears repeating, is you had both Jerry Judy and Drew Lock learning a brand new offense on the fly while simultaneously going through some growing pains, especially for Judy as a rookie. And then obviously Drew Lock had his. He had an injured season. Again, sounds like excuses, but it's also just kind of what it was.
Yeah.
Both guys had inconsistencies, some of that due to inexperience, some of that due to a new system, and some of that due to just maybe some of their own shortcomings in the moment. I expect better play from both. We'll see if Drew Lock gets that opportunity. But Jerry Judy is going to get that opportunity. Whatever chemistry that Jerry Judy has built with Drew Lock, you hope that can only build on. And if Jerry Judy ends up having a different quarterback out there, you hope he can find his way. That's one thing that Jerry Judy's going to have to figure out.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.